Hello, friends. I just want to make a quick video on the concept of rumination or um, really stressful thoughts, racing thoughts, or looping, and how that relates to the nervous system. In terms of a very biological process kind of perspective, um, when we detect a threat, it sets off that defense state, which it ends up with the amygdala becoming like more alert and like basically reminding us like something's wrong, which results in reduced access to that prefrontal cortex where we could finish a loop of a thought without having to repeat it, where we could like solve a problem, make a plan, make a choice. So that's why we don't usually get to a solution when we're in that ruminating or racing thought or looping place, because the amygdala is kind of keeping us or reducing our access to that prefrontal cortex where we could actually problem solve. And for this, I really love to connect with the SOS framework, which I've come up with, which is just an acronym for how to take care of the nervous system um, in a physical way before we try to cognitively solve a problem. Because for many of us, we'll stay in that loop or that defense state, that rumination, um, and we're trying to cognitively solve it, but we don't have access to our cognition. So it's really hard. And it's hard for the amygdala to sense safety without some sort of support. So the SOS stands for sense, offer, and self inquiry. Sense is just the noticing, like, oh, I think I'm having a defense state situation right now. Noticing that in real time takes practice. So I like to encourage people to just start asking, like, how's my body feeling physically on a regular basis, not just when they're stressed out, so they can begin to connect with the noticing, and that becomes sort of like a muscle that with practice it becomes pretty automatic. And then over time, we'll start to notice like, woo, I'm having some really racing thoughts, or like, whoa, my heart is really beating fast, or I'm feeling like super sick to my stomach and I'm starting to disassociate, right? So that's sense. Just start to sense when you're in a defense state. And then the second part of sense is like, okay, am I more mobilized? Am I more immobilized? Racing thoughts could be either, or it could be a mixture, especially if we're fawning. That is like a dorsal and sympathetic mix because we're like mobilized because we're trying to make someone, we're trying to please them so that they'll keep us safer. Certainly mobilized state, we can have racing thoughts, but there can be some dorsal in there because with fawning and with freeze, we're kind of pulling back in order to stay safe, but we may still have some mobilized thoughts. So it could be combo, it could be just mobilized. Um, and so we're sensing what nervous system state. Then we're going to offer some nervous system exercises, and we can cater those exercises to where we are at. If we're like really mobilized, if we're experiencing some dorsal immobilization, you can't really go wrong with some gentle rocking and finding colors because that'll cover all the bases. I encourage people to not start with breathing when you're in a big defense state because your diaphragm is going to be in a like restricting your lungs actually. So it's hard to take a deep breath right after the bat, off the bat. So it might be easier to start with some gentle movement. Taking a little lap is nice. Doing some gentle stretching, some rocking, like I said, some opening and closing, some circles, any kind of gentle movement, and then connecting with your senses, so finding some colors or finding some sounds, things like that can be really nice in combo, movement and orienting, so that we can hit both the mobilization and immobilization. And then we just keep doing exercises until we start to feel like we're back into our prefrontal cortex. Um, this could take just one exercise, 30 seconds, depending on how stressed out your system is, or it could take quite a few. I've had before I needed to like keep doing things for like an hour or two until my nervous system calms down. So it's just gonna match the situation. If we're experiencing, more activation, then it might take a little longer to come back to prefrontal cortex. Um, or frontal lobe. And then once we start to notice that we're back there, generally those racing thoughts will have softened. That's going to be a nice indication. So, just trying to stop racing thoughts does not work very well. But if we offer exercises, then pretty naturally those racing thoughts will start to soften. And then we can invite in some self inquiry and some co regulation. Um, Co-regulation can be with another person, a trusted friend or therapist or coach, or the 988 crisis line or another similar crisis line if you're outside of the US. But it can also be with a journal, with a book, an author you really love, a tree, the sky, some art, an animal, a stuffed animal, um, a song, all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be a person. So connecting with something that's meaningful to you, sharing what's going on, getting some validation, and checking in. What is it that I'm concerned about right now, and how can I validate myself for having that concern? And in that way, we're not so much trying to fix the problem. We're really bringing that compassionate wisdom or witness to the situation. With trauma recovery, they have found that really there's two things that are needed. First thing is you need to restore safety. So that's what we're doing with sensing and offering. And then we want to offer compassionate witness. And that's what we're doing with that self regulation or self inquiry and co regulation, really bringing that validation. So telling your story in a journal, voice recording to 988 in text or making that call to a friend, etc. Writing an email to your coach or therapist. Telling that story and knowing that it's going to be witnessed compassionately is what the system really wants. And then, once we've done all that, we are open back up to our prefrontal cortex where we can now make a choice. And when there's a stressor, it often means that there is a choice that needs to be made or a change that needs to be made. So it comes to tell us that, hey, something needs to be different in order for us to feel okay. And so, there's generally three options when you're making a choice to a stressor around a stressor. And those three options are change it, accept it, or let it go. Say, I don't know, I'm gonna come back to it, basically, walk away. And it might be that you don't come back to it. But that sort of like no resolution is something that can be tricky and it ultimately is a form of acceptance. But sometimes, it's saying like, I'm just upset at that person and I don't know how to not be upset at them. So I'm just gonna like take no action. I'm not gonna engage. And you might not even be at full acceptance yet, but you're accepting that you're not able to accept, if that makes sense. Uh, so yeah, those are some thoughts around rumination, racing thoughts, and looping. And for those of us who have experienced a lot of not a lot of agency in our life, it makes sense to get especially stuck in some of those things because we haven't experienced that shift from the disempowerment of the defense state to the empowerment of having access to the prefrontal cortex. And so we may need just some practice and experience for the nervous system to really connect with the possibility of, oh, I can take care of myself here and I don't need to wait for somebody else to take care of me. Okay, so much love.